So hi, my name's James, and I'm Head of Partnerships and Innovation at Home for Good, which sounds a very grandiose title. It means that I spend most of my time with local authorities or voluntary adoption agencies like PACT, who are with us, and a handful of independent fostering agencies too. I'm also a foster carer, and I live down in Sutton. And my wife and me have been foster carers for the last 6 years now. It was very similarly the first night that we got engaged. We had a discussion about, well, what do we think our families are going to look like? And I'd wanted to foster since I was age 8, and she'd wanted to foster since she was age 15. I've got adopted nieces, and we were like, well, yeah, maybe this is what our life's going to be. We didn't know then a year into marriage we were going to celebrate our first anniversary by having our fostering panel the week after and then being approved. I would certainly advocate caution and slow down a bit further, learn from our mistakes. I should also probably confess that I used to be in the Church of England and I'm not now, so please don't hold that against me in anything I say. But so to try and narrow the gap a little bit, I wanted to start with a little bit of Bible. And in Acts 6, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the story about the daily distribution of bread going wrong. So the situation is actually quite important for the early church, that it has the potential to break apart what is building. And it's the Greek Jews and the Hebraic Jews. And the apostles are spending all their time preaching and teaching the gospel, that actually some of them in the early church are being looked over when it comes to being fed on the day and having their needs being met. And this is a real problem because fractures like that, we know, destroy things. And in Acts 6, it says that the apostles' response was a very wise one. They appointed 7 people who were from across the whole gamut of what the early church looked like, from all the different demographies represented within the church, to lead on this. And they looked for certain key things amongst the people who are going to do this. People who were full of wisdom and people who were full of the Spirit. People who are full of wisdom and people who are full of the Spirit. And the word that's used to describe the ministry is diaconia. It's the same word that's used to describe both the ministry of the word, but also ministry to the poor, which is really trying to get across the fact that both are to be part of what the church is about. Both need to be there, and one not suffering because the other one is being put forth. And I think there's something here for us when we think about fostering adoption, when we think about honouring those who are doing it. It's a ministry, very, very simply. And if we look at people who foster and adopt and consider them that they are partakers in a ministry, we should be honouring them, and we should be honouring them well. So the question for all of you, because you're all part of church, is how do you think your church is doing in that? Because ultimately, honouring somebody is where support starts. So I've got a few pointers, I guess, that have probably been learnt through our own experience. And about 4 or so years ago, I got a phone call from my wife at about 4 to 5 on a Thursday afternoon, and she said, "Help, I've just said yes to 4 foster children." Our birth daughter was 9 at the time. This is in my notes. I might go over a little bit just for the laughs. But she rang and said, "Can you call back and say I've made a mistake?" So I called the social worker to say, "I'm really sorry, my wife's made a mistake. We don't have 4 beds." And she said, "Well, that's a shame because they're in the taxi on the way to your house now." And our support kind of started there because some of our friends came round with a cot bed. They came round with a mattress. So by the time I got home to these 4 children in our house and our 9-month-old birth daughter at the time, thinking what chaos am I about to walk back into, we were already starting to be supported. But I'll tell you something, it is difficult to support foster carers and adopters. And this is why. A study was done by a public sector consultancy fairly recently, trying to work out what types of people decided to foster and adopt. And those who, it was very looking much at fostering, but they found that the people who do it are pioneers, the type of people who want to see a problem and want to get involved, and they want to fix it. Coincidentally, those people are also the worst people to ask for support. But strangely, because of what they're doing, they're the people who most need support because they're going to be pushed to extreme challenges at different points in their life. And I know what this is like personally because at times I felt I need support. But what right do I, because this is a choice I made about my own life to foster and bring this chaos around me, what right do I have to make that impose on somebody else's life to say, please support me? Equally, there's an element where I think if I admit that I'm finding this deeply hard, or whether this is pushing me and my wife and our marriage to sort of the very limits of where we possibly can go, is that an admission that I shouldn't be doing this? That actually what I feel called to is wrong, what she feels called to is wrong. But we know at the same time what we need is support. And that's, I think, helped us learn something, that the onus on finding support is not on the carers, it's not on the doctors, but it is on the wider church body. You are all probably part of a church somewhere. You should be carrying that onus. Whether or not you're here today thinking we want to foster and adopt ourselves, but take that into your attitude at heart, thinking it is on us to seek the support of others in our community. But fundamentally, being supported is about being known. Support gets bandied around a lot in this thing. So if you're starting the process, you will hear this word mentioned a lot. Oh, we've got great support, we've got great post-doctoral support. Those things are important. Sometimes that looks like a therapist. But equally, sometimes support looks like somebody who is going to be willing to come round in the middle of the night because that's when you need them. There's something else that I've noticed that happens a lot when you get asked by people, let me know if there's anything I can do to support you. You know, if you ever find that someone's asking you that question, it's a bit of a problem, and please don't ask it of anybody either, because it's kind of the worst question you can ask somebody. They're already overstretched, they're already feeling those two things in their head, how can I possibly impose? And now I've got to come up with an answer for you to meet your need to support me. Like, that's the wrong way around. So really, what we want to be enculturing in our church is a church that says, not how can I support you, but coming saying, I am going to support you. So maybe I'm going to bring you dinner one night this week. Which night would you like that to be? A very different question to, oh, we'd love to cook for you sometime. You know, oh, thank you, that would be really great. We're putting them out. But it does fundamentally come down to how well do you know those who are caring in your churches. And indeed, if you're about to start the process going forward, how known will you allow yourselves to be? It is important if you want to be supported. It is important if you want to support that there is understanding of actually what is needed. And sometimes it's the sort of pressure points that you don't necessarily see. It is really, really important that you get to know the people who need support. But there are also some things that are really, really important for you not to do. And so be careful not to say, if you have birth children and you hear a foster carer or an adopter saying, gosh, it is so hard, they're really struggling this, oh, I know kids, hey? They're all the same, mine are like that too, because that immediately will alienate you from them, because not all children are alike. Sure, children go through the same challenges often as others. They're going through school, they've got emotional challenges to get over, they've got social challenges to get over, they've got behavioural challenges to get over, they'll have all sorts of challenges. But the thing for children who are coming from a looked after background, they've experienced early life trauma often. And it just means that the experiences they've had are that much more intense. They're at the sharp, pointy ends of the bell curve rather than the middle. So when you see something that looks similar, please don't say it's just the same. Actually, that can be really hurtful to think you do not understand what it's like to be in that point of pressure the whole time. That happens a lot. And there are certain things that I guess that many people, indeed I guess our culture tells us about children and having children, that we can almost take for granted, that you get this sort of wonderful love coming back. It's great when Andy shares that we do receive a blessing back from our children, but sometimes it gets incredibly difficult. Those 4 children who came originally 4 years ago, none of them are living in our house anymore. 2 moved within a week because that was important. You can't look after 5 children under the age of 6 successfully and have a job at the same time, or indeed survive. But the 2 who remained for quite a while. One had to leave 3.5 years later, and because there was a serious disclosure that meant he had to move. And then we discovered too afterwards that actually what had happened meant that at some point his sister was going to have to leave too, for her own good as well as for our birth children. And it is deeply sad when those things happen. It is not something you plan for in the first time. And that's one of the things that foster carers and indeed adopters, you carry that risk, because what you are doing is not about dealing with certainties. And the children who come often have some kind of deficit within their brain, by which I don't mean saying, oh, they have some particular issue, but any trauma has an impact on someone's ability to be able to engage with the challenges that life throws up and deal with them in a measured way, to be resilient enough to cope with them. We can't take for granted to think they're going to be able to just flourish. We can't just think it's going to be a wonderful story that because we offer something and offer them a home, whether that's through fostering adoption, that everything is going to be fine in the end. Sometimes it doesn't work like that, and that's something that is really important, that we are prepared for that if we're going to do this, but equally be prepared for the fact that if somebody is going through that in your community, that does not mean that they are failing at all, and that is not a way in which you should be engaging with them. So I've probably said a lot of things, so other than come to the breakout little session afterwards, I just wanted to end with a few little things. What can you do? And I think fundamentally what we want to be doing in supporting is being able to find ways to say, I see you. I see you, so that the person who is doing something feels known. There's one church we know about where foster carers have a child who wets the bed almost nightly. And so because there is known within the church, some ladies said, put the clothes outside and we will wash them. And they do that on a weekly basis, so that the one thing the carer doesn't have to do is deal with washing dirty bed sheets. Isn't that amazing? Another church we know bought an industrial iron because, hey, if you're dealing with children who've got significant trauma and you're wanting to find time to be able to attach to them and give them the opportunities that they have to have all those like mental neural pathways to be rebuilt, you don't want to be spending your time ironing. So they bought industrial irons and put on a cafe. So it's in Worcester, my hometown, like you take your clothes there and they will iron them for you. Isn't that amazing? And many churches we know have also changed the policies that they operate their youth work on, so they look at it from the viewpoint of how is a child going to experience this, how indeed is a family who fostered or adopted going to experience what we do, to make sure they really line up. If you're in a position of church leadership, I just want to run through a few little things as well for you. We create resources for you. If you want to honour those who foster or adopt, or indeed kinship carers in your community, well, put on a Sunday. We have resources for Mother's Day, Father's Day, Adoption Sunday, you name it. We've made stuff that you can use to honour, to say we see you in your congregations. We also put on children and youth leader training. What you're going to have tonight is just a real sort of like little, dabble your toes briefly in something, but we've got stuff to train you further too. And for foster carers and adopters, make meal rotas standard. When placements change, some of the last things, everybody can cook, whether they can cook well or not. I heard you sometimes. But if only in my church watched that, I love your cooking, please keep providing it. Everybody can cook, and it's one of those things that just takes away that pressure. But for each of us as individuals, please go away and listen. What carers really don't like hearing is saying, oh yeah, that's just the same, or being people who just respond to being given advice. We get enough advice already from many different sources, and some of those we have to really cut out. Please be people who include, even if that means chaos comes to you. Be open and ready for that. As I've already said, say what night can I bring you food, rather than can I bring you food. If a placement ends, even if you kind of think that's probably the right thing, turn up with flowers and chocolates, because the day after, no matter what happens, there are some seriously complex emotions there for the whole family, whether that's birth kids, whether that's the carers. They need people to say, I see you. And just a practical tip, always turn up with a passport, a driver's license and utility bill, because if you say, how can I support you, there's a chance you might need to be DBS checked. If you say, how can I support you, oh, great, you could become a foster auntie or uncle, and you don't turn up with those, that's like saying, I would really love to pay for your house, but I'm never going to give you the money. Or it's not going to work. Turn up with those, and turn up with photocopies already, so they can just pass those on to their social worker and have you approved. If you don't, you are just being cruel. Third, if you are scared of getting involved with children who have had a trauma background, but they're birth children, step in for them. Because often, we've already heard from Fuzz, they can not have all the things that they had beforehand. They don't have the same access to their parents. They are having to share. Well, you can step in and you can love them in a really great way. But really, what I want to say, and come for the session afterwards, is find ways to be able to say, I see you. Find ways to be able to empathise. Find ways to understand that what somebody else's experience is not necessarily your experience. And thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm sorry for running over slightly.